So last month I told you guys that I was switching to the Galaxy S26 Ultra and that I'd let you know how it ultimately went. And I'm not gonna lie, after that video, I never actually ended up committing. It was a busy time, I was going through a move, and I just didn't really want to add any more friction to my plate. Though last week, I actually sold my iPhone 17 Pro, and now I'm completely iPhone-less. And I want to tell you about whether or not I regret it, because despite loving Android and being realistically very unbiased when it comes to these devices, I actually really loved the 17 Pro. And going from a more compact phone back to the Ultra flagship was a really big change. And after being so used to the smaller 17 Pro and iOS in the last handful of months, the S26 Ultra in general has reminded me why I even left Apple in the first place. It also reminded me how much I actually enjoy just using Android. And before we go any further, I just want to say thank you guys so much for being here. We are incredibly close to 100,000 subscribers, which is just mental, and it means the absolute world to me. If you're watching, a like and a sub goes a very long way, and it means a ton. Anyways, I think the first thing that sticks out with the S26 Ultra is the display. I mean, it's been a few months, and it's still, in my opinion, the best that we have here in North America. It has ridiculously thin bezels, the camera cutout is quite small, and it doesn't take up a lot of space. And for the most part, it's pretty much uninterrupted. I know this is gonna sound corny, but hear me out. This is one of the few phones that every time I pick it up and actually look at it, I feel like I'm holding on to something that is truly cutting edge. And I'm trying to be careful not to glaze this because there is a couple of issues, like the fact that 16:9 content, which is what you'd watch most, including this video, aren't actually centered to the display. This is because of what Samsung's doing in software to stop things from touching the camera cutout. And obviously, I'd much rather content be off-centered than have something in the way. But then there's also the whole privacy display feature, which I feel like was supposed to be this massively groundbreaking thing, and it was something that I remember being genuinely excited for because I just like seeing new tech come out. But no matter if you're using extra privacy or the regular version, you're dramatically cutting your display's brightness and quality, and unless you're using extra privacy protection, which basically whitens your whole display and makes you lose a bunch of saturation, privacy display doesn't really do much. Yeah, it can turn on for specific things like notifications, but honestly, I've completely turned off privacy display completely. I mean, I don't need it, I don't have anything to hide, and even if I did, it's not like it's being hidden enough anyways. Though the colors and the resolution on the S26 Ultra are insane. And despite the anti-reflective coating taking a bit of a hit this year, the contrast and brightness and the visibility, especially when I'm outdoors, is all that I could really ask for from a phone today. I do wish the S26 Ultra came in like an S26 Ultra Mini though, because after being so used to a smaller device, this thing feels gigantic. Granted, it is a big device. It has a 6.9-inch display. However, I don't think it feels as big as it actually is. Mostly because Android is kind of smart with the way it handles things like navigation, and having the ability to completely customize your launcher allows you to make tweaks for things that normally would be a pain point on a larger device. So obviously I can swipe back from either side, which means that I don't have to reach my thumb across the phone. Thankfully, because I literally can't. But with using Good Lock and Home Up, I was able to make smaller folders that open in a tinier window where the icon actually is, versus it popping up just directly in the middle of the home screen. So it's kind of nice because on one hand, even though the phone is bigger, it's actually less annoying when it comes to like finger gymnastics and trying to use it one-handed. With this being the Ultra though, and also being an Android device, it does mean it's open to some more quirks and gimmicks. And one of these quote-unquote gimmicks is the S Pen. I'm still very upset that Samsung took away the Bluetooth functionality from this thing, even if it wasn't something that I used a ton. I actually only really ever used it for taking photos, and then I realized that I could just wave my hand and start a selfie timer, so that whole thing for me personally became useless. But I get it, like taking away features isn't exactly cool. And what's also not cool is how awkward the S Pen sits inside of the phone. When it's seated, it's bulging out a little bit, but it's actually much easier to knock out by accident. Like, it feels incredibly loose compared to what I've been used to on the older Ultra devices. And even worse now is you actually have to pay attention to the way that you put it inside of the phone because it only actually sits in one way. It clicks in both ways, but the problem is if you put it in backwards, it just sticks out at the bottom because they made the S Pen follow the curvature of the device. But even though the S Pen for me has been an incredibly forgetful feature and isn't one that I would say that makes the Ultra for me, oh my god, is this thing ever nice to actually have when you need it. Rather than making all of my lists on sticky notes, I've just been jotting them down on the Ultra, which has not only been easier, but it saved me post-it notes, and it's also just saved me headaches because rather than needing to stick it under my monitor, I have a note that could just follow me everywhere. And I feel like when I write things down, I remember them more clearly, which I don't know, it's nicer for me to have, if that makes any sense. And another go-to cop-out that I feel like that comes along with the S Pen is like the whole, oh, I can sign documents on my phone kind of thing. But for some context, this actually really saved me. When we were moving in, my ISP completely screwed me. I had no internet for like almost an entire week while we were here, and I had some like brand deals and some documents that I needed to sign before some deliveries could be made. And I was trying to do it on the iPhone, and it was a nightmare using like Acrobat and then trying to like fat finger it. And then when I pulled out the Ultra to give it a try, it was so much better just signing a doc in Google Docs or being able to actually just use like Chrome and sign it properly with the pen. So even though I don't have like a crazy use case for the S Pen, for me, it comes in handy enough to make having it on the phone a lot better than not having it on the phone. And something that I never actually got to experience with the Ultra before was how strong its Wi-Fi connectivity actually is versus some other devices that I've used. I went from being in a basement apartment and now we're all the way in a 3-story townhome. So like the difference in range from where like my computer is to where the router is in the basement is like 3 separate floors. And with the iPhone, this was a really big issue. It was pretty slow to connect most of the time, but then it also struggled at trying to figure out which network was the best for the room that I was in, whether I needed to use the router up here or the modem that was in the basement. I felt like it was always kind of like hallucinating, and I basically never had a solid connection. But with the Ultra, no matter where I am in the house, it's incredibly stable. Like I went from having video calls dropping out and Instagram Reels freezing out of all things to just having a completely capable phone on my home network that doesn't cause me any problems. I don't know if this is because of the modem that's inside with the Snapdragon chip or if it's because of the antenna layout, but it's been a completely non-issue. And funnily enough, the phone is actually prioritizing the weaker 5 GHz network, whereas the iPhone would try to use 2.4 GHz and still struggle despite those being better networks to connect to at a bigger range. Now, I also now live basically in the middle of nowhere. We're in a subdivision surrounded by like a bunch of farmland. And when it comes to reception, I pretty much never have full bars here. But with the iPhone, until I moved here, I never had a problem with the network. And then since being here, I would get about 2 to 3 bars. On the Samsung, it's really only reporting that I'm losing a single bar most of the day. I don't know how accurate either of those ratings are. It hasn't been an issue on both of the phones in terms of call quality, but it has impacted 5G speeds at times. But even though the performance across the two has been the same, I thought I'd just mention that on the S26 Ultra, it does look like I have a better signal, whatever that means. The actual experience when using the two though feels the same even on data. But what doesn't feel the same with these phones is the heat, or at least the lack of the heat that's on the S26 Ultra. Look, I think titanium is a cool material in terms of marketing, but it makes the phone heavier, and it also kills heat dissipation, which is why both Apple and Samsung moved away from it. And despite the chip in the iPhone being more efficient than the 8 Elite Gen 5 in the Galaxy, I'd say that surprisingly, I'd seen less issues with the S26 Ultra, whether that was at launch or even now to this day. We are also in the middle of a heat wave here in Canada, and it's been very bad. And the only time I felt this phone get warm to the touch in recent memory was during the setup process where I factory reset it to start completely fresh, and when I was sitting in the backyard to edit some photos that I took on Lightroom. I can't show you those photos because of some embargoes. Maybe stay tuned for what's to come, but I'll show you some other ones in a few seconds. The reason that I bring this up though is that it's been so hot that the iPhone, even just running on Apple's CarPlay, was giving me overheating warnings through USB-C. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I actually decided to just jump back to the S26 Ultra and use it as my main phone, because since the last like month or so, I've had significant battery drain on the iPhone as well. Granted, it was the smaller 17 Pro, so it's not necessarily a fair comparison, but I've never seen an overheating warning on the S26 Ultra. And while I was editing those photos, I definitely felt the Ultra throttle a little bit. It took Lightroom a long time to export, but the phone also wasn't getting hot in the hand. Warm, yeah, but to me, this is a really good sign for the longevity of the phone. Sure, throttling sucks, but if it's only gonna happen to me when I'm directly under a nearly 40 degrees Celsius sun doing something that is already demanding, I can't really complain about it. When it comes to the battery life though, it's been honestly a really nice change of pace, I'm not gonna lie. The 60-watt fast charging is noticeable, despite it not being necessarily blazing fast. And even though I use the QHD Plus mode, have notifications on for most apps, and I'm connected to a lot of Bluetooth and smart devices in my home, the only time that I really notice it drain is when I'm doing something demanding. The battery life has been actually incredible, and from what I remember, this hasn't really been the case for me. But like I said, when I set this phone up again, I did a complete reset, a brand new, fresh start, and I didn't transfer it from any other devices that I had, which I know has caused some issues in the past, so I tried to avoid it this time. Now, it's not iPhone 17 Pro Max level when it comes to battery life, but it was definitely beating my 17 Pro, and that for me was already an all-day battery that I didn't have any complaints about prior to the drain that I was experiencing. Oh, and before I forget, I do want to talk about the cameras. So for point and shoot, it's fine. You'll notice some things are leaning a little more blue than they actually look in real life, and it feels a little bit more flat, and there's just not much life to the actual image. And I do like to shoot RAW. I do like editing photos, but I don't want my entire phone filled up with raw images, though I do feel like that's what I actually need to do to get the most out of this device and bring back some of the life. So I've set up a double press on this power button to actually bring up the Camera Raw app, and I have it set to 50 megapixels by default. This lets me quickly take a raw photo, but have all of the manual controls that I might want. And for me, this has been really nice. The sensors on the S26 Ultra are fantastic. They actually hold a ton of detail, and it can be pushed really far in edits. And even when I'm shooting in RAW, I find that it does tend to capture movement pretty decently. I'd say that this is still kind of like a weak point with the S26 Ultra, but it's never really been a big deal for me if I'm being honest. Now, I have also glazed Samsung's APV codec and their log capabilities on the S26 Ultra at launch because it does just look incredible. But even if you're just shooting on the selfie camera in 4K at 30 frames per second, or on the rear cameras and you're not doing any color grading, I think that what you're getting out of this device in terms of how it looks is actually really good. Granted, I think if Samsung just added some saturation to liven things up a little bit, it would objectively look a whole lot better. But in terms of quality and even the microphone, the phone is solid. I just wish that more social media apps could actually benefit or use it to its full extent, which I know is a developer problem and not a Samsung issue, but it's infuriating when you really do have such a powerful camera system and you have to be mindful of how you take and share what you're doing. Anyways though, I'm gonna use this for a little bit longer until something comes around that could maybe fold or flip or I don't know. So yeah, I'll see you next week with a device that might be a little more exciting for you. But if you enjoy this one, a like and a sub to the channel goes a very long way. I just want to say thank you guys once again for being here. And if you've made it all the way through, consider dropping a turtle emoji so I know who the real ones are. See you in the next one. Peace out.